Welcome to Arable Weed Week.
We have planned a week-long series of events to shine a light on the latest weed management thinking and techniques.
Thank you to our sponsors, BASF, Bayer, Aminoa and Horsch, who have made the week possible.
We hope you'll join us for as many live sessions and activities as you can.
Good morning. Bayer is delighted to be sponsoring Day 3 of Arable Weed Week. Please sign up to join our new innovation webinar taking place at 12 p.m. today. We'll be hearing from farmers and industry experts alike, including NIAB's John Cousins. Combining technical know-how with practical solutions, we hope to offer valuable insights into the UK status of ryegrass resistance and the science behind mode of action diversity. We'll be hearing from farmers in Norfolk and Kent about their grassweed management journeys.
I'm John Cousins and I'm a weed biology and management specialist working at NIAB, and we're here today standing in one of our field trials down in Kent in Faversham on Ben Binder's farm, where we are looking at cultural and chemical approaches to manage Italian ryegrass. Italian ryegrass, an interesting weed. It's been a long-standing problem in certain hotspots in the UK, here in Kent, over in the North Essex coast, probably up in Yorkshire around Pontefract and Mar, that sort of area. But what we're seeing more and more in recent years is it's both becoming a more intense problem in those localised areas, but also spreading out and affecting more and more farms. So it's a real weed of emerging concern that we want to understand our best management approaches and understand how herbicides can help us manage the weed. And one of the roots of that problem, that spread, that increasing problem on farm, is herbicide resistance. So what we're seeing in Italian ryegrass is the same herbicide resistance types that we're seeing in a weed like blackgrass. So we're seeing resistance to ALS herbicides, resistance to ACCase herbicides. But in ryegrass, crucially, what we're seeing more and more is outright resistance to flufenicet as a pre-em herbicide. So all in all these different resistance traits taken together mean that some Italian ryegrass populations have just become so incredibly difficult to control with herbicides alone. So increasingly we're looking at the non-chemical cultural approaches to help us manage the weed. And we're standing in a big field trial. This is actually an EU funded project that we're involved with called IWM Praise, where we're looking at some basic culture control information for the weed. And basically what we're finding is the other aspect to why Italian ryegrass has become such an incredible problem for some growers, that although all of the cultural approaches that we've got here, so we have drilling date through the autumn and into the spring and different cultivation approaches, although all of these non-chemical approaches are pointing in the same direction as they are with blackgrass that we're much more used to managing, the level of impact that we're having is just much smaller. So we've got these drilling date blocks where, yes, delayed drilling is having an effect, reducing the density of the weed that we're trying to manage, increasing herbicide performance. But it's not as profound an effect as we're seeing with blackgrass. We've got some spring crops in here, and of course the spring crop again has a further reduction in ryegrass plant numbers. It's not as large as we're seeing with blackgrass, and critically in spring crops these Italian ryegrass individual plants are capable of returning incredibly high levels of seed. So the spring crop strategy isn't as effective. So these two things taken together, the herbicide resistance and the difficulty of using non-chemical approaches, really mean the problem can become very, very difficult to manage in practice. So we've talked to Ben earlier about his approach on farm, which is to be flexible, to not move too much soil, so you're not bringing up seeds from depth. And I think, to me, Ben is having success over time. It's probably a slower process than some of the successes that we're having, again, with blackgrass, for example. So to me, the element of Ben's management which is paying the most dividends is his flexibility, his taking decisions early on. So for example, one of the strategies where we've seen the most success here is early on he will look at a crop like this, for example, and decide it's not going to be a viable cereal crop, and rather than destroying the crop, he'll whole crop silage or forage the whole crop and have an arrangement with a neighbour, so you've got zero seed return for a year. It's a fallow, but it's a fallow that you're being paid for. And it's those sort of thinking outside the box, imaginative approaches that we're going to need more and more to get better management of this weed.
The actual farmed area is just over 600 hectares. We're predominantly silty clay or silty sand loams over flinty chalk. It's very, very abrasive, hard-wearing soil. In some parts of the world, I think they would call it minute soil. 1 minute's too wet and 1 minute's too dry. But it is productive if you get it right. Rainfall is roughly 800 millimetres a year. The ryegrass has been an issue for all my time here. I think it was a historical problem before I arrived. We've ebbed and flowed in terms of resistance, strategy, the management of it. We've tried a raft of different cultural controls. As the new herbicides have come in, and we've ebbed and flowed with better control, and eventually we've built up resistance. And we find ourselves here today with evaluating propolis, which has been a real major step forward. If we look at the farm standard around the trial, you know, I'm actually quite proud of the control we've had this year. But if you look behind me, you can see the untreated plots, and you can get a fairly good grip on what we're up against. Well, it starts in the destruction of the previous crop. Quite often that involves Roundup as a spray off. It involves stale seed beds, frequently shallow, waiting for rainfall before we drill, because unless we've had a stale seed bed, there's pretty much no point in drilling. It involves getting the seed bed right. It involves minimal disturbance drilling, delayed drilling where possible, shallow cultivations, correct herbicide choice. We've changed things around last year so that we can now spray with either tractor, so we can be straight on in that 48-hour window. If we can roll, we roll. If we can't roll, we don't, because it's too wet, depending on what sort of time of year we're at. And then get straight on with the pre-emergent herbicide. Well, obviously there is a very big similarity in resistance terms, but we don't generally have very much blackgrass at all. I think that's probably because we've concentrated so hard on ryegrass over the years. We've largely eliminated blackgrass. Different timings with drilling. The main difference between the two is that ryegrass does seem to germinate 365 days of the year if it's got the right conditions, whereas with blackgrass it does tend to be these very defined windows. In the autumn and a little bit in the spring, whereas ryegrass does tend to come when it feels the conditions are right. I think you tend to get more sporadic plants with ryegrass, but you only need one sporadic plant to shed 1,000 seeds, and then next year you've got it in big quantities. Large. I think really when it's competitive like it is at the moment, as you can see in the plots here, it just thins the crop out so much. So you just don't end up with the ears. I think we've got a lot more knowledge now, both from chemical knowledge, but also the cultural control methods we're using now are, we're using fallows, we're silaging bad bits, rotation is obviously key, cultivation is key, timing is key. A lot of that we probably knew anyway, but we've actually had to do something about it because of resistance issues. It's been an evolving picture really. Do I think we're on top of it? I think we're definitely on the right path now. We're using low disturbance drilling now, very shallow cultivations, and yeah, I think if you look at the periphery of the field compared to the trial, you have to say we're definitely on the right track. Flufenicet, fops and dims, yeah, it's the lot really. Avoid deep cultivations at all costs, because if you've got a big seed bank, you're just going to drag it back up. So ploughing is pretty much out. Just pay absolute maximum attention to detail with your pre-emergent herbicides. I'm astounded at the success we've had this year. We've followed the guidance in terms of timing, and we've rigidly stuck to it. Just before Christmas, when you start winding down for Christmas, you have an inkling as to where you've got to with weed control, and this year I was just happy to say, yep, we've cracked it. Now that's not to say that we've 100% cracked it, but it was a big step forward this year, big step forward. The idea is we shift everything to the autumn, start with a clean stale seed bed, good pre and post emergent herbicide program, and then we've done 95% of the work before the spring. Now there will always be instances where, for whatever reason, you end up with a population in the spring, and we do our very best to try and get onto that as soon as we possibly can. Yeah, I mean, it always has been and always will have to be the focus. You've got to get your pre-emergence and your post-emergence right, because, like I say, that's 90 to 95% of what you are able to do sensibly and cost effectively as well.
Hello, I'm Richard Prankard, Commercial Technical Manager for Bayer Crop Science, and I'm here to introduce the next webinar session. This will be run by John Cousins, talking about the modes of action and diversity of those modes of action in ways that we can use them to tackle ryegrass.
So we have here some boxes of Italian ryegrass populations that we've grown up in the glasshouses at Park Farm and Niab, and sprayed with a range of different herbicides, just to illustrate something about different mode of actions, combining different mode of actions to use that diversity to get more effective control. And what we've actually got is some populations that we've identified as already having quite high levels of flufenicet resistance. A couple of populations from Kent, including one from this farm, a couple of populations from Essex, which has always been an area with some very difficult Italian ryegrass populations, and then a couple of samples that came from near Doncaster, up a bit further north, and then a couple of reference populations that we always include in this kind of work. To start with, we have a sensitive population of Italian ryegrass. It's our reference population in this half of these boxes here. And you can see we've got untreated, we've got a box that was treated with diflufenican, this box was treated with flufenicet, aclonifen, and then the three-way combination of diflufenican, flufenicet and aclonifen, which is Liberator plus Proclus in these boxes. And what you can see straight away is where we've got these sensitive populations, not selected for flufenicet resistance, we've got incredibly high potential levels of control from that flufenicet. And ryegrass, if anything, is slightly more sensitive to flufenicet than blackgrass is. Where we don't have resistance, it's been the mainstay of quite a lot of Italian ryegrass control in the past. Straight away you can see, as soon as we move away from these sensitive individuals to these populations collected from across the country, we can see that we've just got flufenicet resistance at the field scale, this herbicide is no longer giving us effective control as it was on the sensitive standard. And you can see similarly some of the other herbicides are not controlling the weed as well. The crucial thing that I think we want to focus on more and more is not thinking about products, not even thinking about actives, but thinking about combining different modes of action of herbicides to get that ultimate level of control and that sustainable level of control. So if we look across all of them, you've got your untreated, diflufenican, flufenicet and aclonifen, 3 actives, 3 modes of action. It's when you combine the 3 together at these boxes right at the front that we can start to get control of some of these, even some of these really, really difficult populations. So I should say these are not field rates, these are slightly reduced rates that we've reduced to try and get these differences in the boxes and to try and make the point about to get sustainable control, to make the actives that we do have last longer. We want to be looking at combining modes of action.
Bayer Crop Science is really pleased to be working in collaboration with NIAB around a UK-wide ryegrass resistance survey.
Yeah, so it's a really timely initiative jointly between NIAB and Bayer Crop Science. Italian ryegrass is a weed that's very much on the move, coming out of its perhaps traditional heartlands, and we're finding it in much more places. Herbicide resistance, we have a certain amount of information about herbicide resistance from some work that we did a few years ago. We know it's an increasing problem. We've particularly highlighted the issues around flufenicet resistance, and that's one of the actives that we're going to screen against in this upcoming survey. One of the really important things alongside the herbicide resistance element is going to be the questionnaire element, I think, where we're asking farmers and advisors just to give us a little bit of feedback about their experience with the weed, positives and negatives.
We're launching today, so everybody will have the opportunity to participate.
So visit the website on screen for some information about how to collect the sample, how to send us a sample, and how to give us a bit of feedback about your experiences with the weed. So sustainable weed management is about diversity. It's about harnessing that diversity in different herbicide modes of action that we've got available to us to sustain the herbicide effectiveness over the long term and maximise the efficiency of use. But as we've seen when we've looked with the farmer at what he's doing on farm today, it's also about harnessing the diversity of chemical and cultural approaches that we can deploy to manage this weed in the long term. Bayer Crop Science has put together a short animation that goes into much more detail about how these different modes of action are actually working in the plant.
Applied together, Liberator and Proclus work in synergy, delivering maximum efficacy against a wide spectrum of grass weeds and broadleaved weeds. With 3 modes of action, this combination offers a highly effective resistance management strategy. Liberator contains flufenicet and diflufenican. Flufenicet moves through the soil profile to be absorbed by the roots of deeper germinating weeds. Diflufenican remains on the soil surface, as does aclonifen. Proclus contains aclonifen with a unique mode of action and forms a film on the soil surface. Emerging weed shoots take up the active as they grow through this film. Let's look at what happens within the plant cell. Reactives target 3 different parts of the plant cell. Flufenicet targets the endoplasmic reticulum to inhibit very long-chain fatty acid synthesis. This weakens the cell's membrane, suppressing cell division and weed growth. Aclonifen and diflufenican work in the chloroplast to target the thylakoid and stroma lamellae. This interrupts photosynthesis, causing a bleaching effect to the weed. When combined, these different modes of action provide highly effective grass weed control. To find out more, visit cropscience.bayer.co.uk/aclonifen effect.
So we're out here today on the 24th of May at Arthur Markilly's farm, just east of Wisbeach, with Sam Markilly and Jason Esser to have a look at our Liberator Proclus herbicide trial, where we've compared Liberator Proclus and the farm standard and we're here to see what we've learned.
My name's Sam Markilly, a third generation farmer from Arthur Markilly Limited, Wisbech, Cambridgeshire. Great for farming, not good for your lifestyle. 1,200 hectares, mostly combinable. Our rotation is wheat, all-seed rape, wheat, spring beans. Blackgrass is not dominant on the farm. We haven't got any resistance, but it's there in the background, and we can't afford to let it slip or get away from us. We are very focused on blackgrass. We have fairly much a bulletproof pre-emergence program, or most years that we can get it on, and it's at the level where it's roguable. So over sort of 750 hectares, 3 people can rogue it in 3 or 4 weeks, which is where we want to maintain that level and not let it get away. Stale seed beds, glyphosate pre-drilling, and that's pretty much it really. We've dropped all seed rape out of the rotation last year, and that was giving us a few problems because the blackgrass control is we're finding not very good in all seed rape at the moment. Probably conditions, seedbed conditions, and probably resistance. Yeah, we're just finding it not working, basically, the chemistry. We have generally good drainage, and we try to do our cultivations in a timely manner, but the last 2 winters that we have had surface water in places. Basically, I like to start drilling in October, so if that's delayed drilling then it is, but we like to be done middle to end of October at the limit on the heavy soil types. We drilled this field on the 19th of October.
So I stood here today, so I'm looking across this great field of wheat that you've got established here. This is a trial field that we've established Liberator Precluse versus the farm standard, which was in here, Sam?
Pendimethalin or Crystal 4 litres a hectare and Hurricane 0.15.
Brilliant. So the purpose of this trial for us was to see really a comparison, an on-farm comparison, to see how the new chemistry, the clonophen in Precluse, is working comparable to that of market standards out there at the moment. So we were keen to get some on-farm data to see the effect that we would have out here. Do we learn anything from the start of this trial? Thinking back to establishment in October, November, conditions weren't particularly favourable for getting crops in the ground in this part of the world.
I don't think the seed beds were too bad, but it was very catchy and very wet conditions. We drilled this field on the 19th of October, I think in reasonable conditions, but the foregoing weather forecast was very catchy with heavy rains due within the week's forecast. I think it was a perfect set for this trial.
And looking across, I can see we've got a couple of canes that are staggered across. How did you replicate the trial here?
First of all, we chose this field because it was first weed after beans, and the beans were quite poorly established after the last year's dry spring. And we didn't put any post-emergence herbicide on for the blackgrass, so the actual seed return was quite high. So we've chosen this part of the field because it's probably got the most variability in soil types and probably the highest blackgrass pressure that we have. And by alternating tram lines, we can get a true comparison between the 2 programs.
Yeah, that was brilliant, and it was very noticeable early on. We had some difference in crop effect from the crop safety perspective of the trial, sort of 2 weeks after emergence.
Yeah, clear to the line. A clear difference between the 2 programs as far as crop safety and emergence was concerned. And actually, I think I was very impressed, and I think that's where this chemical will come into its own.
Yeah, so with the aclonophen, it's working very complementary with the flufenicet and DFF, diflufenican, that's in Liberator. So the aclonophen is sitting on the soil surface. When the weed moves up through the aclonophen and penetrates through the soil surface, it takes up the aclonophen, resulting in plant death. soon afterwards. In terms of the crop establishment and the crop safety elements, we did see a really good difference. I think when I did some plant counts out here, I calculated about 28% better emergence from Liberator Precluse versus your farm standard. So that's quite a result.
I would agree. Yeah. I think that it's evened up now throughout the season and the autumn, but there was definitely a clear difference. And I think if the seedbeds were worse, you would see the difference even greater than what it was in this field.
So what was the main driver for you running this particular trial with us this year?
I think the autumn prior to this one, we learned a lot of lessons, and the fact is we weren't really aware of the potential crop damage we could get with our pre-emergence applications. We learned a lot of lessons, and yeah, we paid for it really because there was a lot of damage.
Across the area, with having quite a wet autumn and a damp autumn, there's a lot of moisture, so residual chemistry worked very well this year, but follow-up treatments were very few and far between on farm. Did you manage to get on farm on field to actually do a follow-up this year, or did it just have a standard pre-emergence mix?
We just had a standard pre-emergence mix. I think the control on both were very good, and we couldn't really draw a line between it.
Yeah, and certainly looking across now, we just about be able to see blackgrass heads pushing through at the end of May, but it looks a very clean crop here across the board. So based on a very heavy blackgrass infested field, as you previously mentioned from last year, I think the control's been very good.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Great.
Yeah.
Haven't done any plant counts since. I think it's sort of recovered and is tillered out. So what we've got here is a very strong crop stand across the board, and generally from our small plot trials, which we put through a combine, a small amount of crop damage early on can actually be recovered later in the season.
Okay, well, I look forward to combining and seeing the difference in yield. The biggest thing for you guys, or the product, is the crop safety aspect and your timeliness of application. Because I think if the autumn was wetter or we didn't get the spray on straight away, I think that's where it will benefit the most, and we will see a difference in blackgrass control.
Definitely going forward.
Yeah.
So we know from trials and from work that's been carried out that pre-emergence is the most important timing for getting residual chemistry on in terms of efficacy. What's your sort of view on that?
I think timeliness of application is incredibly important, and I think with the crop safety issue, this is an added advantage.
And do you look at the forecast going forward to make sure that if you're drilling a block of land, you can get on with the sprayer soon after?
Yeah,
very much so.
48 hours after drilling? Yes, yeah, we've been stung even this year with on one field by being caught out with the forecast and having a heavy downpour overnight, and we saw a huge delay in emergence.
Yeah, so going forward, we've obviously learnt a lot already, and we're going to put a combine through here, still to come. But will you be changing your approach going forward?
Yes, I think we will. I think we'll have a more flexible approach. Weather forecasts, data drilling, timeliness of application forecast. I think it all has a role to play. But yes, we will be using a lot more Precluse in the future.
And important to be using different modes of action,
yes.
Residual chemistry, because late season contact herbicides aren't working quite as well in many places. Do you suffer from resistance on farm here?
No, not particularly, not at the moment, but yeah, we've still got to be careful.
Yeah, absolutely, and manage and use different mode of actions at different times in the year.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So we've seen from these field trials, Sam, that we've learnt quite a good deal, and going forward you will be one of our forward farmers within the group of trialists, looking at new chemistry and new products coming through in the pipeline that will be available on farm commercially succeeding years. Are you looking forward to this?
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. I think it's important now to do more R&D on farm because it matters to me here in location, and I need to be at the forefront of discovering new chemistry or new methods, and hopefully we'll gain the benefit from doing it.
Yeah, a big learning curve all the way through, which you can then implement and take on into your own farm. So in terms of the historic background population on the farm, is it very much historic, or is it more recent that the blackgrass has come into the fore?
I think it's always been in the background, but I haven't inherited a bad blackgrass problem. but I have taken on some other farms on FBTs that have had a bad blackgrass problem, and we have improved to the point that it is roguable, and we're on top of it, and we're not having to change our rotation because of it.
So key elements to that have been establishing a good crop in good conditions, the right rotation.
Yeah, delayed drilling, cultural controls, right application, nozzle types, just being attention to detail.
Yeah, and product choice
And
ultimately
product
at the
choice,
end of it. Yeah.
Jason Esser, been working on the farm here for 7 years now. Recently progressed to assistant manager. Got 4 full-time employees here, so we tend to keep busy most of the year.
Brilliant. And what's your involvement in terms of spray input and decision making on farm? Do you walk fields with the agronomist here?
Yeah, so every 2 weeks we walk the whole farm with our agronomist, so we get a good feel for what's going on, and always looking at timely applications and making sure we're on top of everything.
Yeah, so you've got to know this field very well during the course of the trial. Have you noticed anything out here, particularly to sort of take home messages, that big learnings from this particular piece?
Yeah, well, we have walked this one probably more than all of the others just to see what is going on, and as Sam alluded to, we've been very impressed with certainly the crop safety of the clonophen this year compared to our farm standard. Yeah. So we'll definitely be looking at that going into our programme this coming autumn.
Bearing in mind sort of spraying and application of this field, did you spray this particular trial?
Yes, I did, yeah. Obviously with pre-ems you're looking to get really good coverage. Seedbed conditions weren't too bad, but we still used our alternating 05 Syngenta potato nozzles at 200 litres a hectare just to ensure we had the best possible coverage.
I don't think you managed to roll soon after drilling here, so it was important that clods as well were
covered.
Yeah,
due to wet conditions we were unable to roll, and we would normally have done, so especially with the clods the application is very important to get backwards, front and downwards coverage.
Having had so much involvement in the trials this year, what have been your main take-home messages?
Well, I think it's just really good to see new chemistry on your own farm, in your own situation. You don't get a better comparison than that. I've been really impressed with the trial we did here this year, and we look forward to trials in the future as well with you guys.
Brilliant. And it's quite useful because we're now set up with field view on farm here, so we could see satellite imagery, and it'll make it a lot easier mapping the combine yield data when we put that through.
Yeah, definitely. With it on the sprayer and the combine now, we can certainly have a lot of maps to analyse after harvest.
Brilliant, and it'll give us a real good picture of overall performance.
Yep, definitely.
So in conclusion, from what we've seen walking across this field regularly over the last 6 months, have been good crop establishment, particularly from the Liberator Precluse. We saw 28% better establishment over the farm standard, as well as comparable efficacy based on the conditions, and good blackgrass control all round. And we'll be looking forward to working with Sam going forward, particularly interesting to see the yield results coming off this field and the other trials that we have going on farm.
That's the end of today's session. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope you found it useful and informative. To find out more and to sign up to take part in any of the live sessions, visit the Arable Weed Week Hub at www.croptechshow.com/Arable Weed Week.